Hello and welcome everyone to the Varsity Tutors StarCourse series, where we are back live at the South Carolina Aquarium today to investigate the sensational world of stingrays. And we've got the perfect crew of teachers here to teach you about it. First, you're going to hear from McLaughlin at the South Carolina Aquarium, and then we are going to go into the tanks themselves and get up close and personal with these sensational stingrays. Now, a couple things before we get started. One, please keep it interactive. You see the chat box to the right of the screen. Our team at South Carolina Aquarium is going to ask you some questions to find out what you know and want to know about stingrays, so use that chat box there. Also, ask any questions you have throughout the session, and in the last 10 minutes or so, I'll interview Susan with your questions to get you as many answers as possible. Next thing is, you can't go to the South Carolina Aquarium without having a picture to prove you were there and get it up on Instagram to prove it for the world to see. So as we get into the tanks, we'll have a couple moments where it's great for you to be able to lean into the screen, snap a stingray selfie, and if you put it up on Instagram and tag South Carolina Aquarium and Varsity Tutors, you'll be entered to win a prize package that includes a spot in Varsity Tutors Wildlife Creature Club. So have a camera ready, keep it interactive, and with all that said, let me turn it over to your teacher for today, Susan at South Carolina Aquarium.
Hi, everyone. Probably good afternoon for most of you, depending on where you are. I know it's afternoon here at the South Carolina Aquarium. We actually just closed, so the building is all ours now. So that means that things don't stop here. We've still got our educators in the building that are, finishing up programs. You've got me and my friend Elena that are going to join you here with our stingrays. And the animals stay here too. So even though the aquarium closes, there's a lot of animals to enjoy as well. And we made sure the stingrays wouldn't be too sleepy for our program. We did bring some of their favorite snacks and even some enrichment. Enrichment is something extra fun for them. We're going to learn a little bit about at the end of our program. So we've got lots of really fun stuff in store for you. But first I want to show you just kind of an overview about stingrays. And I want to start with kind of having you be able to picture where I am, right? So you're not here with me at the aquarium since we're doing this virtually, but I want to be able to kind of zoom in. So if you look at a giant map of the world, if you can find out even just what country you're in here, I think probably a lot of you are United States, Canada, but you could be somewhere else too. So figure out where you are. And then if you zoom in just a little bit, you'll be able to see there's a little star on the Atlantic coast, and that's where I am. So we're going to get even closer. So if we zoom in closer from the view of the whole world, we're going to look at the United States. So if you're in the United States, find your state right now. Kind of figure out where you are. And then I want to show you where we are, which is in South Carolina. And we are really close to the Atlantic Ocean. And if you were to zoom in from there, we actually are going to be able to see our aquarium. So I'm outside right now. And if you look really closely at this next picture of the aquarium, you can see we're right on the Charleston Harbor. So this is a body of water that actually leads out to the ocean. So there's a bridge off to the side there. If you've ever been to visit Charleston or if you're local here, it's pretty iconic. That's our Ravenel Bridge. And this goes all the way over a river. And that river is going to flow out from the inland all the way upstate of South Carolina, flow all the way out and meet the ocean. So a river is going to be fresh water. The ocean is going to be salt water. And so when they're mixing right here in front of the building, it's creating brackish water. That means it's a little bit salty. What's really cool is because our aquarium is right there on that brackish water, we can actually use giant pipes under the building to pull in real water. This is water mixed with ocean water. So we get to pull in that real water from the natural environment, clean it up really nice, make sure there's no trash or chemicals or anything in it that could hurt our animals. And then we're going to be able to use it for all of our tanks, which is really cool because all of our animals here, for the most part, live in water. They need a lot of water at an aquarium. Now, I want to tell you about stingrays kind of in general. So that's what we're going to spend most of our time talking about today. So what is a stingray? And I put some kind of funny things that people call stingrays at the top. So I've heard them called a lot of funny stuff. So graceful sea pancakes with a dangerous tail. I also hear people call them sea flaps. These are not scientific names for stingrays, but they're pretty funny looking animals. And they're kind of iconic too. I feel like if you're looking at one, you probably know what it is, but if you see one, you might be able to identify it as a stingray. But maybe you're wondering, what even is a stingray? Is it a reptile? Is it a fish? It is a type of fish. And it actually is in the same family as the sharks. So it's called an elsamobranch. So it's a cartilaginous fish. And if that's a whole bunch of really big words. So that's why I wanted you to see them typed out too, because that's a whole bunch going on. But cartilaginous fish means that their bones are made out of cartilage instead of bone. And you guys actually have cartilage in your bodies too. So if you push on your nose like this, or you wiggle your ears, those parts of our body are actually made out of cartilage. So they've got structure to them, right? They're not totally flexible, but they can move around a little bit. They're kind of bendy. That's what the entire skeleton of a stingray and a shark are actually made of. The only part of their body that's going to be harder than that is their teeth. So that's why if you've ever been on the beach and been looking for shark's teeth, or you can find stingray teeth then too, that's the only part of the body that will actually turn into a fossil. The rest of their body, their bones, their cartilaginous bones, are so soft that they don't fossilize. So that's pretty cool. They're a really unique type of animal. And they are related to the sharks, which I know everybody's a big fan of sharks. I want to tell you why stingrays are so cool too. So a lot of stingrays actually do have stinging barbs. Some of them don't, and some of them have more than one. There's kind of a wide range of those stinging barbs, but that's a really hard calcified part of their body. So it could fossilize like their teeth do, but it grows on top of their tail and it's serrated. You're actually going to get to see one up really close in a little bit later in this program, but it can be filled with a toxin that's going to really not feel good. It's great protection for a stingray. All right. I also want to show you guys another picture here, all about what stingrays are native to South Carolina. There's actually about 200 species of stingrays in the world. And then there's a whole other group of animals that go with the sharks and the rays. Those are called skates. So there's a lot of cartilaginous fish in the world, and probably we haven't found all of them. So much of the ocean is unexplored right now that there could be tons of species undiscovered, which always makes me very excited. If any of you guys are really into marine biology, or you want to be a scientist or an explorer someday, you could go out and explore the ocean and discover species that maybe no one knew existed before. That's something about that is just magical. But there are a lot of stingrays that we do see locally here in South Carolina because a lot of them are coastal species. So some of them, there are a couple that are pelagic, so they're going to spend more time in that open ocean, but most of them are going to be coastal. So they're going to be close to the shore, maybe shallower, warmer waters, maybe even up into some fresh water and rivers. There's kind of a wide range, but they like the shallower water. So some of the species we see off the coast of South Carolina are southern stingrays and cownose rays. We're going to get a really close look at both of those. Also Atlantic stingrays, blunt nose stingrays, the smooth butterfly ray, eagle rays, and batoids. So there's kind of a whole bunch of groups. But we're going to get a really close look at those first two today. So if you look at them in this picture, the one on top is a cownose ray, and the one lower down in that picture is a southern stingray. And they have really different behaviors, which is part of why they have different body shapes. One kind of goes hand in hand with another, different behaviors, different body types. So if you're looking at the cownose ray who's flying up a little bit higher, has really distinct wings. They're kind of, they form like these really big triangles off the sides of their body. Their eyes stick out to the sides of their head, and he hangs out higher in the water column. So he's not flat against the ground. He's kind of up in the middle. And cownose rays, that's where they're going to spend most of their time, in the middle of that water column. And they've got those really distinct wings because they're very good swimmers. And that's important because they're a very migratory species. So we see them off the coast here in South Carolina, but only during certain times of the year, because they're going to be kind of going up the East Coast during the summer and then back down south where it's warmer for the winter. Southern stingrays, we're going to find kind of year round here, but they have a different body shape. So they're kind of flatter and very round overall, and they're going to kind of stay close to the bottom. So we do have them in the tank that we're going to dive into in just a minute, but they're often hiding. They're a little bit hard to see. We'll definitely see cownose rays, but sometimes the southern stingrays are a little bit more elusive. Their eyes are on top of their heads, and they're bottom feeders. So you can tell that the cownose rays are going to be kind of able to see above and below them when they're looking for their food or hiding from their prey. But the southern stingrays are going to be down flat on the bottom. So their eyes on top of their head allows them to be able to see kind of all above them, making sure that there's nothing trying to come and eat them like a predator. It also makes it so that they can bury themselves down in the sand really well. All right. And I want to show you kind of just close up on a cow-nosed ray because they're a really unique type of ray too. They've got some really kind of funny things going on with their body. So cow-nosed ray anatomy is just looking at that body. And again, we'll get to see it really close in the tank in just a minute. But it's easy when they're holding still in a picture. So up at the top of the picture, you can kind of see where their tail is kind of a long cord-like tail, sticks straight out, and their barb is not at the end of it. It's kind of close to their body. A lot of people think of it as being at the end of their tail, kind of like you might imagine like a bee would sting with their stinger right behind them. The stingrays actually grow a barb usually close to their body or even about halfway down their tail, depending on the species. And then if you're looking kind of at the front face of that stingray, they've got their eyes, like I said, on the sides of their head. Right behind their eyes, they've got a hole called a spiracle, which is part of their gills. We'll learn a little bit about that in a minute. They also have these fin lobes, these big fins on the front of their head. It looks like two mouths on the front of their head that are trying to eat something. And when we feed them, you'll get a close look at that too. That actually helps them form suction around their food. So there's a purpose for it, even though it looks really weird. Their mouth is actually way underneath their body. And you can probably see it in this picture, but stingrays usually have a pretty cute little smile. Their faces are like permanently curved into one little smile. And it looks like they've got these goofy little teeth, but their teeth are actually really far back in their mouths where we can't see them. So all those little ridges you see are their lips. They've got kind of these fringy lips that allow them to kind of siphon out any of the sand or sediment that's down on the ocean floor when they're eating. And then there's also gill flaps. So on their belly, they've got those gills, those different slits that are right there that are going to allow them to breathe. Gills, very important when you live underwater. And the spiracles are kind of all part of that gill system. So they can breathe whether they're flat on the bottom or whether they're up swimming around. All right. And then the question, it's probably on everybody's mind, what happens if I get stung by a stingray, right? Sounds very scary, but I don't want you guys to worry too much. There's actually some things you can do to avoid being stung by a stingray. And I'm going to let my friend Elena tell you all about that in just 1 second. But the main thing is that they've got serrated barb, can be filled with venom. If you ever do get stung, do not remove the barb on your own. To relieve the pain, you can actually put it in really hot water. That helps kind of denature the protein that is giving you that stinging feeling. And then definitely seek medical attention. You want to go see a doctor so that somebody professional can remove that barb for you. You probably want antibiotics because if you had an open wound in the ocean, that's going to make a big difference too. So definitely don't want to get stung, but it is not usually something that's going to be fatal by any means. It's just going to hurt, kind of like a jellyfish sting. So most important, find a doctor. But I'm going to prove to you guys you don't have to be worried about stingrays because my friend Elena is inside the tank that we're going to explore. So give me 1 second here. I'm going to switch over so you guys can get a close look at Elena. And she's going to tell you all about why we don't need to be worried about stingrays.
Hey everyone, my name is Elena. I'm also an educator here at the South Carolina Aquarium, and I am so happy that you guys wanted to learn about stingrays today because this is one of my favorite things to do at work. As you can see, I am in the stingray tank, and if you guys are worried about me being in the stingray tank full of 32 stingrays, not to worry. These stingrays that I'm hanging out with today, they actually can't sting. So Susan did mention that these two species that I'm with today are cow-nosed rays and southern rays. They would have those stingers or barbs out in the wild. However, their barbs, they kind of grow towards the base of their tail and they grow a lot like our fingernails. So what we do here at the aquarium is we get to trim those fingernails down just about every 6 months or so. So I don't have to worry about getting stung here in this tank. So intro to this tank, I'm here with some cow-nosed stingrays. Those are our rays that are swimming past me right now with the rounded heads and those wide wings that you guys just saw in that diagram. And I also do have 5 southern stingrays in this tank here as well, but just like Susan mentioned, they like to hang out on the bottom. They're really good at burying themselves in the gravel down below. They also like to hang out in the deeper areas of this tank as well. I also have a few other friends in this tank. So if you guys can see through this front window a little bit, you might see some fishy friends swimming past me a little bit as well. We also have some striped mullet in this tank, as well as some horseshoe crabs. You guys might be familiar with those animals as well. They have a very important job to do here in this tank. Our stingrays, they are so excited all the time about the snacks that they get during the day, but our mullet and our horseshoe crabs, they get all the scraps that they miss. So they help to keep our tank here nice and clean. So our stingrays have so many different adaptations that they can use to be great hunters in the wild and also just to survive out in the big blue as well. So we can start by talking about those adaptations that allow them to live in the water and be aquatic animals. So as our stingrays get super excited with Susan right here in front of the window, you guys might be able to get a good look at those bellies. You can see those stingray smiles. So you can see those teeth, those fake teeth. They look like teeth, but that's that fleshy curtain that Susan was mentioning before that helps them to filter out that sediment from what they're eating and keep their food trapped inside. So underneath on their belly, you can also see their gills. Might be able to see on these wings right over here. They have two sets of gills right on either side underneath on their belly. And they also have these really weird looking holes right next to their eyes. So we'll see if our friends come over and join us, give us a better look. But if you look right next to their eyes are on either side of their head, and right behind they have those two really big holes. So those are something very cool. They are called spiracles. You guys might have heard a rumor before that sharks and rays have to keep swimming all the time in order to survive and in order to breathe. However, this actually isn't true for our ray species and a lot of our sharks too, especially the sharks that we're going to find hanging out on the bottom dwelling animals, or animals that hang out in reef systems too, like some of the sharks that we do have at the aquarium as well. So what the spiracle does is right now our rays are pretty active. They're still super excited from all the excitement they got at the aquarium today, but they do like to hang out on the bottom a whole lot, just like our southern rays do all the time as well. So when they're hanging out on the bottom, they don't need to keep swimming to keep water pushing past their gills. They can just use those spiracles. So what they do is they're like little tunnels. They can kind of suction that water and pull it past their gills. That way they can still keep breathing and stay still at the same time. So that is going to be super important for any bottom dwelling animal, but it's also going to let them be such great hunters too, because they can spend more time on the bottom of the ocean and in the gravel and finding their prey that hides underneath the sand as well. So you can also get a good look at their fins. Just like Susan mentioned, the fins of our cownose and southern rays are going to be a little bit different. So they have super defined fins that you can see kind of flapping up and down, kind of looks like they're flying through the water column. So that's going to be really important and helping them move through the water column. Just like Susan mentioned, our cownose rays, they are going to be found pretty much anywhere throughout the water column. They can be found all the way down on the bottom, but if you see them in the wild, maybe during their migration season, you can also see them all the way at the very top of the water. And they can also use those to get some good momentum and breach out in the wild as well. We also talked about how they're related to sharks, and sharks, very classic part of the shark that I'm sure everybody's aware of is their big dorsal fin that you would see coming up above the surface of the water. And you'll notice that our stingrays here, they don't really have a big dorsal fin. Their dorsal fin was kind of flattened through evolution. So that's their adaptation to be able to hang out on the bottom. Their dorsal side is completely flat, which lets them kind of bury themselves in the sand and hide from their predators as well. So you can also tell where they live based on those wings, just like we talked about with our two different species. So hopefully a southern ray will come over and join us too, so we can see the difference. Oh, we've got one all the way in the back over here if you guys are able to see that. So you can see how they don't really have those defined wings. They're kind of all round. I kind of think that they look like raviolis. So that's, that's usually what I tell people. So those little raviolis, they kind of hang out on the bottom and they bury themselves in the sand a lot better that way. You can see those two eyes all the way at the top of their head as well. So their skin is also really cool. We're getting a really nice look of it right in front of the window here. So you can notice that the cownose rays have a very dark color on top. They kind of range from a dark gray to a dark brown color. And underneath they're super light, almost white in color. So this is called counter shading. And this is something really common amongst a lot of different aquatic animals. Our stingrays, lots of different sharks, especially great white sharks have a really good example of that counter shading. But even our dolphins, if you guys have seen the belly of a dolphin before, it's also bright white in color with that darker back. So this counter shading really helps them hide from their own predators in the wild. So if you were a predator on the bottom of the ocean looking up at a stingray, you would see that white light belly blending in with the light surface of the water. But if you were a predator above them looking down, you would see that dark body on top kind of blending in with the sediment or the bottom of the ocean floor. So it just kind of helps them hide in a very natural way. So their predators are going to mostly be sharks. Definitely lots of different species of sharks that would like to hunt some stingrays. They can also be hunted by some cobia. Those are some really large fish. We do have those in the aquarium here as well. They look a lot like sharks, but they are not sharks. They are bony fishes. And even turtles can also go after some stingrays. We do have a sea turtle hospital here at the South Carolina Aquarium. And we do have a pretty new turtle that we just got over the summer. Her name is Moonstone. She is a loggerhead sea turtle. That's our state reptile here in South Carolina. And unfortunately, Moonstone had a run-in with a couple of stingrays. She had a stingray barb in her right flipper and her back flipper as well. So she was probably going after one of those rays, and that ray had a pretty great defense system. So we talked a little bit about their barbs before. We're gonna get to look at a barb here as well. So their barbs grow a little bit towards the base of their tail, and this is what a stingray barb looks like. So this is one that's pretty long. So they grow right towards the base, kind of right at the bottom of their body here. And their barbs are venomous, like we talked about too. So they have a venomous sheath over the top. And what this barb is basically just a modified spine. And what they do when they sting, it's not so much like a jellyfish sting, it's more of like a stab. So what they do is they can flick their tail upwards and just kind of eject that barb, kind of like a scorpion, if you've ever seen a scorpion kind of using its tail to sting too. So that's what they're going to do when their predators come by. However, our stingrays, they kind of get a bad rep for stinging. However, they do not actually want to sting all the time. So I mentioned that our stingrays here in the touch tank, they have their barbs shipped just about every 6 months. And that's because it takes just about 6 months for them to grow this barb back. So this barb takes a very, very long time, and therefore they really don't want to sting. They don't want to use it as much as they can. It's kind of like a last resort situation. So if you used your barb, you would have to go 6 whole months without any protection at all. And that is a really long time, especially out in the ocean where there's tons of sharks and tons of turtles and cobia running around. You definitely want to make sure that you save that up for when you need it most. So something else really cool about this skin of our stingrays here is if you've ever touched a stingray before, if you haven't, I highly recommend it. It's so much fun. They don't feel like sharks if you've ever pet a shark before too, but they have the same exact scales as most sharks. They're called dermal denticles, and it basically means skin teeth. It's like overlapping teeny tiny teeth along their skin. And these dermal denticles, got a horseshoe crab on my foot. These dermal denticles are really effective in keeping parasites off of the bodies of our stingrays and sharks. But our stingrays, they have something in addition to those dermal denticles, and that is a mucus covering. So if you guys don't know what mucus is, it is basically some stingray snot, and it's very important in keeping them healthy. So it might sound a little bit gross to think about we are touching stingrays and they've got a whole bunch of stingray snot all over their bodies, but it's so important keeping them healthy, and it stops bacteria from growing on top of their bodies. So we have to walk around all day long, making sure that we're using a lot of hand sanitizer, washing our hands every 5 minutes. I'm sure you guys are used to that. This horseshoe crab is really loving my foot over here. But our stingrays, they don't have to worry about that. They don't have to worry about going around to a bunch of buttons and getting their hand sanitizer. It is already all built in. Another cool part of our stingray friends, I'm going to take this horseshoe crab with me, is their teeth. So we talked about those fake teeth. It kind of looks like teeth on the outside, and it's just their lips. But this is what a stingray jaw looks like. So this is the inside of their jaw. And their teeth are really far back in their mouths. So whenever we reach into our touch tank to pet our stingrays or even feed our stingrays, we don't have to worry about them biting us because their teeth are just too far back for them to be able to do that. But this is what the inside of their jaw looks like as well with their teeth. So their teeth are really teeny tiny little flat plates, and they can lose them and replace them continuously, just like our sharks do. So when we find shark teeth along the beach, we can also find some stingray teeth. They're just these little flat rectangles. We can look at some close-up ones too. I'll grab my net because there's always tons of stingray teeth here at the bottom of this tank. And you can also find some fossilized ones, just like we find fossilized shark teeth as well. Let's see if I can grab one. So their teeth are really useful, especially for the type of prey that they eat. Got this fresh tooth right here. So this is just about how small they are. You can see that kind of rigid part right here. This rigid part just kind of glues right down in their mouth, and then that flat part is what hangs out right on top. These ones are a little bit worn down from being in the tank for a while. You can see just how flat that is. And that's because they like to eat a lot of animals with shells. So here at the aquarium, we feed them a lot of shrimp and smelt and some clams too, but they can feed on pretty much all of that in the wild, some fish, but definitely a lot of crabs and clams and just things that have those outer shells that are gonna be hard to crunch through. So they have these crushing plates that they just can crush together, swallow their food whole, and they are all good to go. And we are actually going to take a look at what it's like to feed our stingrays. Got some of their favorite snacks over here. I mentioned they like to eat smelt. They go crazy for it. And here at the aquarium, they do get 13 pounds of food a day as well. So even though they are kind of like dogs begging for treats sometimes, it looks like they may not have seen food before, they get 13 pounds. This is what the smelt looks like that we're going to be feeding them today. So my favorite way to feed the stingrays is just to start out with a flat hand like that. And I take my fish and just pinch it right between my fingers. Can go either way, just as long as most of the fish sticks up out of the top of my hand, just like that. And that is because I'm going to come over to the wall here, just give it a high five, make sure my hand's nice and flat, and slide it all the way in. Whoop. Also a fun part about being in this tank is I get lots of stingray hugs. Our stingray is just going to come up over my hand and just slurp it right out of my fingers. It's a very funny feeling. So our stingrays, they cannot sting, they cannot bite here in this tank, but they get so excited so easily. They get very, very splashy. I'm going to do a couple more here. Yeah, if you guys wanted to take any photos of our stingrays here, you are more than welcome. Really great opportunity. Whoop. Especially while they are getting their food, because this is when they are the most excited. I'll give you guys a couple more fish. You guys can take your photos if you like. Whoa! In the splash zone. So something else that we do here at the aquarium, aside from hand feeding them like this, is we also do something called a broadcast feed. So if any of you guys have fish at home, or maybe a friend that has a fish tank, basically how you feed those tanks is you just sprinkle the food right across the top. And that's pretty much exactly what we do here for some of our animals. So for our stingrays, we'll just throw this smelt right across the surface for them. Make sure everybody gets exactly what they need. Perfect. All right, now they're all super happy. So these guys are really good hunters as well. I mentioned they are bottom feeders. They like to hunt for their food in the sand, but they have something really cool adaptation on the front of their faces. You guys might have heard before how sharks and rays can sense electrical signals in the water. So while I'm hanging out with my stingray friends right now, every single stingray, all 32 of them, is able to feel my heartbeat. And the way that they do that, hi Stingray. The way they do that is they have something called ampullae of Lorenzini. It's a very, very, very fancy term. So I'll say it again, ampullae of Lorenzini. And basically these are jelly-filled pores right on the front of their face. So if you do feed a stingray one day, you might feel how the front of their face is just a little more scratchy feeling than the back of it, back of that mucus covering. Those are those jelly pores that they can conduct that electricity in and feel the heartbeat of myself or the prey that they're searching for in the sand as well. That's something that makes them an awesome hunter along with our sharks. They have that same sense too. All right, so now that we've fed our stingrays, they're still super, super excited. So I think it might be time to do some enrichment with them here as well. So enrichment is something that we like to do with all of our animals here at the aquarium. We want to make sure that they are living their best lives here as best as we can. So enrichment, basically, if you think about it, if you guys woke up at the same time every morning, had the same thing for breakfast, went outside and took the same way to work or the same way to school, and just did the same thing over and over and over again every single day, you would get super bored super quickly. So we want to avoid that with our animals that are living here at the aquarium. So we like to do something called enrichment, just to enrich their lives, give them something fun to do. And that comes in the form of a few different ways. So we can give them a choice, a challenge. And a lot of this comes in the form of food. So we do have some food enrichment with us today. So what we've got is from our lovely friend in Dive Ops, Angela has made us some very cute pumpkin ice pops for our stingrays. And we also have a fish popsicle, very festive for our holiday season as well. So the food for our stingrays They just like to get extra snacks always. They're very food motivated, these guys here, kind of just like our dogs and cats at home. And for our other form of enrichment, we also just like to give them something new in their enclosure as well. So we'll get to that in just a moment. But I'll show you guys this super fancy fish popsicle in the shape of a coffin, very festive. So giving our animals different snacks just helps to keep them from getting bored, keep their lives exciting and interesting here at the aquarium so they never know what they're going to get. And our other form of enrichment is also super exciting. I'm very excited to put this in the tank for them today. So what we do for a few of our different animals here at the aquarium, including our otters and our sea turtles, is we put this kind of like car wash fabric material in some of their exhibits, and it can mimic some seagrass that they could hide in the wild, or just kind of give them something new to look at, new to touch as well. So it's kind of like a felt material. So basically just doing anything new or weird or exciting in any of their animals exhibit is a form of enrichment for them. So you have these fun tombstones that we're going to place right in front of the window, see how they feel about it. We're actually giving this a test run today. See how our stingrays do. You can see that our dive team is very good at coming up with puns that have to do with stingrays. So feeding is something that we do every day for our stingrays. They get a mix of smelt, shrimp, clams in the morning, and then our guests get to feed them throughout the day here with all of this fun smelt. Forward. In terms of our conservation for our stingrays here too. So they are bottom feeders. So they keep our oceans clean, just like our horseshoe crabs that are helping us out in this tank. They are bottom feeders. So they are keeping the bottom of the ocean nice and clean for us. They're helping that ecosystem stay nice and healthy and getting rid of any disease that could be in some lower populations. And they're also an important food source for a lot of our other animals, like our sharks and our turtles and cobias as well in the wild. So Susan mentioned that in order to keep ourselves safe from our stingrays and also keep our stingrays safe in the wild, one really easy thing that we can do that I'm also doing right now is called the Stingray Shuffle. So if you've never done the Stingray Shuffle before, it's very easy. Next time that you want to go to the beach, anywhere at all, but especially where you know that there are stingrays present, all you have to do is plant your feet down in the sand when you want to go out into the water and just shuffle all the way out. So our stingrays, they have that sense to sense our heartbeat. So they're pretty good at knowing where we are, but shaking up the sand a little bit and moving it around gives them a nice warning and they will get right out of your way. So just like I mentioned before, they don't want to use that stinger unless it's a very important last resort situation. So giving them that nice warning can help to protect us from that stingray sting and help protect them in the future so they don't have to use their barbs.
All right, guys. I got very splashed when Elena was feeding all of the rays, but I'm excited to answer any questions you had. So if you've got questions in the chat, I would love to get to answer those for you before we finish up.
And you know this crowd well, all kinds of amazing questions. Hopefully you guys all got great pictures with the stingrays down there. Remember, if you put them up on Instagram, tag South Carolina Aquarium and Varsity Tutors, you'll be entered to win a spot in Wildlife Creature Club where you can learn about all kinds of amazing creatures, although it's hard to top the stingray. I think this presentation, thanks to the whole team out there from Enrichment and being in the tanks and all those kind of things for us. We all have giant smiles on our faces right now. One of my favorite questions was, we know that the stingrays have that smile. That's, you know, their mouth is lower. They've got that kind of permanent smile. Do we know why that is? Is there a biological reason that their mouth is shaped like a smile? Are they just that happy? Can you tell us more about why that is?
Oh, I love that question. Because that's how I think about things too. You know, you see something on an animal and it might be really cute. And I think there's nothing wrong with being a scientist and thinking animals are cute. But it's really, I think it's important to, when you see something cute, you think, why does that animal have that? You know, you don't just automatically think it must just be happy. And I think it's really important with animals to not just assume that they have specific human emotions. So even though a stingray might always have a smile, doesn't mean necessarily they're always happy. We don't know what they're thinking. They probably have kind of that curved mouth. It's probably just the best way to get those fish or food or anything out of the sand into their mouths. So any way that helps them form suction better is going to be really advantageous to them. So probably that's how they evolved, to have that really kind of flat line as a mouth. Maybe even just a little bit of a curve to it. But I love that question. You guys are already thinking like scientists.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you for the question. You'll love, there's many more great ones where that came from. And I think maybe they're happy that they have such a great adaptation to allow them to eat more. So it all kind of goes hand in hand. Hey, to another emotion that may not be happiness. A lot of people wanted to know, you know, kind of in a couple of, when they're getting debarbed or when they do sting and go through that process. Do we know, does that hurt? Is it more like getting a haircut or fingernails trimmed, is how somebody put it? Or is that something that, you know, they feel pain, you know, for that particular process too?
Very good question. Yeah, I gotta imagine it's a lot like getting fingernails trimmed. There is sort of like a skin sheath over it. It's a very thin layer of sort of flesh. So it probably doesn't feel awesome. It's probably not their favorite thing in the world. I think of it like when I cut my dog's toenails, right? He's not a huge fan of it, but if you give him lots of treats when you're doing it, he doesn't even notice. So that's what we do with our stingrays too. We're going to be we work as a whole team. You actually catch them up on like sort of like this hammock. They swim up over the top of the hammock and then someone's just feeding them all their favorite snacks. They don't even really flinch. They don't notice when they're getting their barb trimmed. So it's really kind of about distracting them, but also rewarding them with something. So as long as they're getting their favorite snacks, they're not very concerned about it. In the wild, if they had to use it because they were scared, I don't know if it would hurt them a little bit then, but probably they're most focused on surviving at that point. So I don't think it hurts them a lot. It's a lot more like getting your nails trimmed.
It's like a stingray spa day. We pamper them and then they come out a little bit, you know, just more streamlined and all those kind of things is fantastic. Hey, people were blown away by a few things. I know my mind is blown that the whole tail isn't the barb. I was today years old when I learned. I was always kind of figured the end of a tail was what would get you. But another one that really got people was the fact that they're so related to sharks, and even kind of, you know, seeing a little bit of the evolution that, well, you know, their dorsal fin is down, but in other ways they act really like them. Can you tell us a little bit more about other things they are related to? I know some people wanted to make sure, like, are they categorized as fish or something else? It sounds like it would be if they're related to sharks. Can you tell us what else is in the stingray family?
Yeah, that's a great question. So they are related to fish, but fish is a really big group. But fish kind of branches off into two different groups of fish. So there's bony fish and cartilaginous fish. So bony fish is probably most of what you would think of when you think of a fish. You know, think of Finding Nemo. If you're going to think of a little clownfish, that's a bony fish. The only types of cartilaginous fish are the ones that fall into this same family of elsamobranchs. So that's sharks, skates, and rays. So skates are very similar to rays, but they are a little bit different. They have kind of longer bodies, usually thicker tails, and they give birth differently than stingrays do too. So stingrays actually have live birth. So they might have between like 1 and 6 pups, depending on what species they are, but they actually will have a live birth. So they have eggs inside of their bodies. So they're not mammals giving live birth. They have eggs at one point. The eggs actually hatch and then they have a live birth from there. And I have never seen like it actually happen. I've seen the babies in our tank before. But the last person that I talked to that works here that watched it happen said it was almost like a little burrito. Like he came out and then he unrolled. And I thought that was the cutest thing I've ever heard.
Well, idea for our next class together, if we can time things out right, which may be difficult, but I think everyone out there really wants to see that. That is really fascinating. They are such a small subset of fish. I think all of us will be saying the word cartilaginous over and over again tonight, partially because it's a cool new word, at least new to a lot of us, but it's just so fun to say too. So we'll get that out there. Hey, I'm sure you get a lot of these. Everybody wants to know, you know, biggest, fastest, strongest, all those kind of things. So let me package a couple couple of those together for you. The ones in your tank, how much do they weigh as you guys do those? We kind of saw their general size. Add on to that, how big can rays really even get? We saw, kind of a general size thing here. And then I want to add on one. You mentioned that the cartilage doesn't really fossilize. Do we have any idea how long stingrays have been around? We know that sharks have been around a long time, but is that hard to get at because the fossil record's a little bit shaky?
It is really hard to get at. Yeah. And I don't know exactly where they first appear in the fossil record. Like I don't have a good how many years ago for you off the top of my head, but they did diverge from sharks. So sharks have been around for millions of years, hundreds of millions of years. And stingrays did evolve kind of after them, but not a long time after them. But yeah, you're exactly right. It's really hard to find in the fossil record how long these animals have been around. We're basing it all pretty much off of their teeth. Same thing with the sharks too. We get those really big megalodon shark's teeth, but we don't really know necessarily that much about what their actual body shape looked like because we don't have any fossils of that. So we're basing a lot of their size off of their teeth too. But the size of the ones in our tank, I don't know a good weight on them. We don't usually take them out of the water and weigh them very often, but they're hefty. They're very muscular bodies. I think if we lifted one of our bigger ones, it'd probably be close to 50 pounds. They can get to have, actually I've got a really good, I'll walk you guys over here. We actually have a really fun thing right here where you can see how big you are compared to a stingray too. So there's a couple of the species that we have in here. So our cow-nose rays are the ones we looked at. They can get to be about 4-foot wingspan. The southern stingrays that we have in our tank are actually really small right now. They're young, but they could get to have maybe a 6-foot wingspan. And then we don't have any spotted eagle rays in here, but they get really large, maybe even a 10-foot wingspan. And that's not the largest ray in the world. They can get to be, ones like our manta rays, they can get even larger than that. So there's some big rays out there, although they probably wouldn't fit in our tank. And a lot of the really big species also breach, so they can jump really far out of the water. So they probably wouldn't be in our tank for very long. If we tried to keep them in here, they'd be jumping out. So we've got some of our smaller species in here.
That's fascinating. And a follow-up question on breachings. We learned a lot. They're bottom feeders. What they eat is down low. Why would they breach? Is that to get away from predators? That's what causes them to want to jump out of the water?
That's a great question. It could be from trying to get away from predators. It could be a lot of the time when we see ours they don't do a full breach in here, but they'll come up to the surface and almost jump a little bit. They can breach, they don't do it very often. A lot of it is mating behavior. So it's a lot of males chasing females and then them kind of launching themselves out of the water. Sometimes it makes a really big splash. Sometimes the males will do that to be very territorial, to tell the other males that, this female is his girl or something like that. So it can be communication, it can be mating behavior, or it can be trying to escape a predator or something. So there's probably a lot of reasons they could do it.
As I'm asking that, I'm thinking, how many of us haven't just jumped up and tried to swat something in the hallway or simply touch the ceiling in that room? So of course, stingrays, they're enjoying Halloween, related snacks and things. So, the mating behavior of we just kind of do it to see if we can do it and impress our friends. It's cool to see they have behaviors that are similar to that. Hey, one other question I thought was great, thinking like a marine biologist, is someone was asking, hey, since they've evolved the way their dorsal fins, how do they stop from completely rolling over? Is there, what do they have to kind of keep them level and not kind of maybe get swept away by, by waves, tides, anything like that?
Great question. So their body shape helps a lot. If they were really round, it'd be easy for them to keep rolling over in the waves, but they're being really flat. If you imagine the difference between being in a really narrow canoe versus a really wide boat, you're a lot less likely to be able to tip over something that's a lot wider. And their weight is distributed too. So they're very good at swimming. Just we probably trip and fall sometimes, but for the most part, as humans, we're pretty good at walking upright and not just tipping over. They're really good at kind of swimming upright through the water column. But the waves could really toss them around if they were caught, too close to the surface in a big storm. That's part of why they are really good at diving down and burying themselves in the sand. If they get, if they're scared by something, it could even be to avoid that weather too. So I don't think they have to worry about flipping over too much. Though they could. Sometimes in their behavior with communication with each other, they'll actually flip all the way upside down on purpose. But they spend most of their time upright and they don't have to worry about rolling around.
Nice. Excellent. Thank you. And great questions, everyone out there that's been thinking like marine biologists, which I guess maybe leads me to maybe a last one here. We've had a blast. We've done sea turtles together, river otters, now stingrays. I know you're coming back here a couple more times before the end of the year. It seems like there's just no end to the cool species out there at South Carolina Aquarium. What's coming up next with South Carolina Aquarium and Varsity Tutors?
Oh my gosh, we've got a couple of things planned, but I believe our next one is going to be some animals that you probably don't get a really close look at, but they're going to be lobsters and jellies. And you're probably thinking, what do lobsters and jellyfish have in common? It's actually a lot. They're both invertebrates and they're both really cool. We're going to learn so much about them, and that is coming up next. So I hope all of you guys join me again with more awesome marine biology questions, because I'm very impressed with the way you guys are thinking.
Excellent. Well, I think a lot of us have you guys to thank for that. We've been learning a ton through this series. We're really excited to come back to learn about those exciting invertebrates. A huge thanks to the whole team out there, and especially the Stingrays today. For all of you out there, thank you for all of your amazing questions. We're excited to see your pictures up online, and I'll have that information up here on a slide in just a minute for you guys to be able to know who to tag and all those kind of things. I'll also add, even if you had a great picture here, feel free to follow up. If you were inspired to be a stingray for Halloween, then we'd love to see those pictures too. So Susan, thanks so much as always. This was a blast. Look forward to seeing you back here next month. Everybody else out there, we're excited to see those pictures up here and see you back here again soon. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you soon.